Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it. And thank you for spending the time with us over your lunch hour or maybe even at 2 a.m. listening to the replay some night. So I want to welcome you today. My name is Bo Gebbe, Vice President at Evolving Solutions. If I haven't had the chance to meet you, maybe I'll share a little bit about our company here in a couple of minutes. And then I'll formally introduce our speaker here in a couple of minutes as well. But would like to welcome Scott Wiest, the Chief Technologist for North America Hybrid IT at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. For those of you that may be newer to Evolving Solutions, just a little bit about our organization. We are based in Minneapolis, but work with clients throughout the Midwest and throughout the country. We really focus on helping clients modernize and automate their mission-critical applications, their mission-critical infrastructure, really to support what's next, the business transformation, the digital transformation of all of our companies. We really focus on driving long-term relationships with our clients. So we call that, client-centric consulting, but really we focus on the long-term relationships. One of the best parts of our business is we've been around for 25 years. Some of our clients that we started with 25 years ago are still clients today, and we appreciate that. And we work to develop those long-term relationships with all of our clients and all of our partners, like HPE. We really focus on what we call the modern operations piece of our hybrid cloud vision. And for us at Evolving Solutions, modern operations is really centered around the notion of, we are all being tasked, even in these times of transformation, more than ever, we've got to do more than ever. But really, how are we supporting our core business, our legacy business, but also supporting the innovation agenda of our company and all of our client companies? So to be able to support the legacy, to be able to support the innovation, both critical, both very important. However, nobody's getting double the budget or double the staff to do that. So we focus really a lot in this notion of modern operations, everything from workload placement to data management, backup retention. How do we orchestrate and automate environments to help IT folks be able to spend their time on the more critical tasks? How do we have a secure environment? How do we monitor that environment? And how do we have data-driven analytics to know that when there is a problem, we're not being reactive. We should know that there's a problem before there's a problem. And then how do you fold all of that into your service management, your service catalog? So for us, none of this matters. Technology doesn't matter unless you have the right people and process in place, and also unless you're driving the right value to the business. So as I look at our hybrid cloud vision, and this is how we start every client discussion, we fit up very nicely with what Scott's going to talk about today, and HPE's vision and strategy around hybrid cloud for the new enterprise. So I will stop sharing my screen here, and Scott, if you want to start getting yours set up, but I'd like to formally welcome Scott. And for those of you that have joined us at our in-person technology updates in the past, Scott joined us last year, pre-COVID, and when we could all get together at a golf course. But Scott is the Chief Technologist for North America Hybrid IT and Director of Technology and Data Center Architecture at HPE. Scott spends the bulk of his time with senior leaders, helping them define their 2 to 5 year blueprint and define what HPE calls their digital renovation agenda. Scott's in a pretty unique position at HPE where he gets to spend and share his time with a multitude of constituents, including clients, HPE's internal R&D teams, solution launch teams, business partners like Evolving Solutions, and strategic solution providers such as Intel, AMD, and running the gamut. Scott's has extensive experience in cloud transformation and adoption across Mode 1 and Mode 2 applications. He also has a wealth of industry expertise from hyperscale computing to mission-critical applications like SAP HANA, from big data and information optimization to digital transformation, and from agile process implementation to DevOps and containerization of workloads. Scott, in his current role as Chief Technologist for North America, leads a team of chief technologists, senior technologists, and business transformation experts that span multiple vertical industries and areas of expertise. And Scott, I just made you a presenter there, so you should be able to share your charts now. And I will just mention that during the session today, if you have any questions for Scott, please feel free to put those into the Q&A panel. We're going to try and save a few minutes here before the top of the hour to get to those questions of Scott. And if we don't get to the question, we'll make sure to follow up via email afterwards. So Scott, thank you again for joining us, and we appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Bo, for the warm welcome. Just double checking my audio quality is good. Everything okay?
Perfect.
Okay, great. And welcome, everybody. Thanks for attending, as Bo said. I'm going to try to keep this at somewhat of a high level, as Bo described. I've worked with more than 6,000 different clients across vertical industries, so I've experienced a bit of stuff. Our job is to help you implement these digital transformation journeys and provide the right technology, people, and process balance, as Bo said, to make it happen. So just kind of gravitate here, and please ask any questions. So I think for folks that are experienced with you at Packard Enterprise, we've seen our own share of journey. And I just want folks to look at what's on the right. If you look at what we call accelerating next for folks is not just a hybrid journey. It's data-driven, it's agile, it's artificial intelligence, it's next-gen IT processes and procedures. All of this comes into focus for us. And I think those need to be interlocked, especially as folks embrace an edge to core to cloud strategy, where you have a unified way to operate data-driven capabilities, as well as high very, very critical areas like zero trust that's coming into organizations, becoming even more popular and more relevant to organizations as they move forward. So what we're focused on, right, is it's about engagement, it's about experience. The customer's the North Star. It's about driving across the different disciplines within an organization to accelerate your next journey, as Bo described, whether that's discovery, if you're in pharma, whether it's new biotech capabilities. If you're a retailer, it's how to accelerate the journey and intimacy with your end customer, and so on and so forth. And it's also about accelerating the future. You'll see in some of our journey, for example, we've been heavily involved with the COVID-19 fight, using our Cray supercomputers to take 4.5 billion simulations down to 4 days instead of 4 years. And so it's going to be these kinds of great leaps that accelerate us all into the next. And in order to do that, you have to adopt a hybrid model. And that's our focus today, as Bo described. And a lot of it's driven by the fact that the world's hyper-connected, where everything computes and everything will be understood. And that's the end goal, or the journey, right? It's not true today. Organizations have an average of 36 copies of the same data, with only about 8% understood. So our challenge holistically in this hybrid world is to make it so nearly all of that data is understood for the next capabilities that you're trying to drive for your business and your end customers. So the real question is, are we in a vicious cycle or unparalleled opportunity around how to drive innovation? And so I tell folks all the time, how do you move from renovation to innovation? Lift and shift, keep the lights on what we call mode 1, hardware defined, manual, very process intensive, to software defined, frictionless, very higher velocity, to mode 3, hybrid cloud journey with a cloud operating model. And can we do this, right? And this becomes a really interesting journey for folks. And how do we not be disrupted, but use positive disruption into our advantage? Hopefully this is going to work for me here. So what we're focused on here is this next wave of digital transformation. And I know for everyone listening, digital transformation is probably as overused of a term at this point as cloud. But there's a big shift going, that's being filled by apps and data everywhere. What we're talking about is policies that were out at the edge or in the OT environment can't be kept excluded any longer, that was happening in the core data center, that's happening out in robo, that's going to now happen in hyperscaler cloud. Those need to be all imagined together with zero trust security policies, with unified data models around efficacy and value, with a hybrid model around the ability to be flexible, agile, and change your mind, to be able to develop somewhere but run somewhere else, so portability becomes key. And that's why IT requires this hybrid approach. And this has been evolving. So just looking at some macro trends that are compelling. Again, the shift from ops to apps, and I think folks know the layer cake of IT ops at the bottom, and a newer kind of emerging field of AI ops above that. So self-remediation, self-healing, and then DevOps and DevSecOps, and then network ops, compliance ops, cloud ops, ML ops, and that's kind of the layer cake. And so you're going to see a shift up that stack of that layer cake, and us have the ability to integrate that together with partnership with Evolving Solutions. And so it's this whole construct, and you'll see this as a main theme. The data center definition is a fungible element. The data center is everywhere because the data is everywhere, and it needs to live everywhere. And the policies and procedures we've all used for most of our careers don't apply to that as well as they should. And so folks are embracing, agile technologies. They're embracing data-driven. They're embracing software-defined. They're embracing hybrid operating models to focus that area in a way that's unified from all the way from the edge to the cloud to the core. And, I talked to this already, new approaches to security. So from trust everything and deny to trust nothing. And that's the new policy. And this requires, in some cases, advanced capabilities like redesigning global network, changing microsegmentation policies, overlays, underlays, east, west, north, south, policies of onboarding, bring your own devices, OT onboarding. These all have to be imagined together in order to have a zero trust policy, because everyone lives in fear of some OT device coming on the network, living there for a long time in an intruded way, making its way into the data center, eventually making its way into the hyperscale cloud developed next generation apps, and no way to get it out. And so this new zero trust policy is really heavy focus for us. You've all heard way too much about data explosion. It's for sure true, right? But we're going to need characteristics around AI ML to be able to harness it. No human could sift through the data, especially unstructured data or human-driven data, in a way that's meaningful. So we're starting to see really advanced embrace of AI ML technologies across an enterprise. So really, really important. Part of the ability to do that is being able to manage a distributed complex cloud. So, embracing the cloud operating model, but to be able to manage and distribute that so it's service-driven, getting people out of the mix of subject matter expertise and driving from a self-service catalog can build you back the cycles. I call it find efficiency within to be able to drive towards those more value-added areas. And then, of course, new business imperatives in this new world we're living in. We're seeing across organizations just different priorities, some things being put on pause, other new priorities coming forward. I think we're all dealing with it in different ways based on our industry. So let's see here. And so what we're talking about here is digital efforts have been moving in the same direction, but at different speeds. So how do we make that so there's a unified speed of capability? And every organization has entered this timeline at a different time. Bleeding edge, first generation adopters now. It's been an interesting journey for a lot of folks on their cloud operating model of what they've been able to achieve to date and what is on the horizon, because you're going to see a lot is unrealized at this point. And so this is actually a great opportunity to be just kind of moving into a mature mode, a refactored way to be able to, embrace a cloud experience. So moving forward, so every digital effort's going to enable speed everywhere. And so what we're talking about again is, if I'm edge-centric, cloud-enabled, how do I build a strategy that encompasses all of that in a very holistic way across where my apps and data are going to live everywhere? Not just a separate policy for edge and remote office, and a separate for the data center, and a separate for Azure, and a separate for AWS, and a separate for GCP, and a separate for for Cloud 28 Plus. That over time will get us back into technical debt and technical drift. So it's just the same problem rehashed over in a new modernized way. So part of what Evolving Solutions is really exceptional at is like sifting through that digital journey to define where you can make the great strides forward, and also determining where the speed bumps that wreck cars are to avoid them, right? And it's about driving this journey all the way to a digital experience. Right, and so this becomes that blueprint that we mentioned twice already to move from renovation to innovation and build that blueprint that looks out 3 to 5 years or beyond. Everybody's 1-year journey is already in motion. That's kind of in flight. Folks know what they're doing, but out in that 3 to 5 year, there's a lot of disruptive technology and disruptive processes and procedures coming into the industry, cross verticals, that I think if folks embrace them, can give you that competitive edge that everyone is looking for. And so it's about this too. If you think about disruptive innovation and sustaining innovation, most of us are caught in sustaining. We run out of data center power, we run out of physical floor space, we run out of people and skills. We get caught in technical debt for upgrades, for compliance or security, whatever they are, or end of life of software applications. So I get caught a lot in sustaining, and I never can quite get to the disruptive positive innovation. So building those digital experience blueprint in between there allows you to build creative tension between these two things to drive from delivery optimized to innovation optimized. And part of the journey that Evolving in HPE can take you on is to be able to very quickly get to that blueprint that lets you prioritize. And it's not about, not using what you've already solved for. Most organizations have great assets and capabilities around some of this, but in other areas could use a bit of help. And so our job is to help you and remove stuff out of your worry bucket and make it easier for you to take this journey. And so because of that, HPE reinvented ourselves once again to build a new vision around becoming an edge to cloud platform as a service company and drive that innovation and acceleration where everything can be imagined as a service as customers are moving from owning things to using things, as we all are as humans as well. So there's this great opportunity that encompasses from edge to cloud. So we want to be able to give you that secure journey, the secure capability on hybrid transformation to modernize those applications, but also embrace more modern platforms. Bo had that in one of his earlier slides. Folks are racing towards modern platforms like composable and hyper-converged and software-defined driven things because they need far more velocity than they have, and they have to get away from subject matter expertise to touch every component and drive towards day two optimization, not day zero and day one for folks who subscribe to those terminologies. And so it's about driving this enterprise of the future that's edge-centric, data-driven, cloud-enabled, and secured everywhere. And I cannot say that is enough. Because of the secured everywhere approach, we just acquired Sitel, which is the de facto standard for identity secure policy management across the open source world. So for example, if you built a cloud native container application in Azure and wanted to then move it to an on-prem capability under Rancher or our container platform, the containers would move, but the policies wouldn't. So really you would not be able to run. These are some of those big challenges for organizations of adopting the next generation technology. And our job is to democratize or lower those barriers so it's easier to use. And also the same is going on around data-driven. And so being always on and always fast, because a lot of times I see folks start fast and go slow. It's very tough to stay agile, and it's very tough to stay in disruptive innovation mode versus going back to I've got to do all the upgrades, I've got to do all the patching, all the compliance, all the security, all the things I've got to do. So it's about building that balance point around this. And as we know, it's all being driven by the next generation of apps. And if I were to succinctly talk about it, right, it's what I call the shift right effect. Most of my career has been spent in, as Bo described early on, in systems of record, mission critical apps. We all plan for SAP or Oracle eBusiness or Amdocs for billing or electronic medical record with Epic. The list is endless, and we do most of our capacity planning around that for those peak moments, all the HADR processes and principles. That being said, those systems of records are still critically important for open enrollment, all the areas that we're on in industries. Retailers for inventory control are on the shelf. But at the end of the day, all the new interaction is at the edge, where the system of interaction of engagement are generating now 90% of the data. So it's what I call the shift right effect. So I have to imagine all of that in a collective way now in a hybrid model. And that's what we're talking about here today. Everyone has a cloud first mandate. Everyone's got some on-prem, edge, co-load, and hyperscale capabilities. I mean, the average organization's got 4.6 clouds. I think the projections will go to about 8.6 clouds over the next 2 years. And so cloud's a part of everyday IT, and hybrid is the new normal. And so what we're finding is some of the journeys to public cloud, although very good, can provide agility and innovation. It's hard to imagine 20 months out, which is about the time period it takes to scale a production tier 0, tier 1 app, the goal is maybe to innovate in the cloud, but it doesn't mean you're always going to run it there permanently. So this whole permanence construct has been refactored now to, I want to build for innovation, build for agility, and build for portability. I'll use all the locations of a cloud operating model to my benefit, not just a singular one. Because everyone's got, a fear of being locked in, a fear of being caught in a cost model, a fear of not being portable enough to be able to be as agile as their business, whether you're doing merger and acquisition or you're just in exponential growth or being disrupted by a competitor. And part of this is because there's still barriers to a cloud-enabled world that, bring us the full value to not be realized. We all know cost matters. We all know there's a cloud skills gap and there's an open source skills gap going out there depending on the organization. Culture is really important. I talked about this before. Technology, people, and economics have to be in equal measure. And what we're talking about is taking early career folks and late career folks like myself, crashing those folks together. On one side, folks know how to build production, scalable, highly available tier 0, tier 1 apps. And on the left side of that, folks know how to build apps very, very fast, but maybe don't know how to scale them or build them to tier 0, tier 1. We need to blend those people together. I'm always going to have walls of latency. I can't escape that just because I've moved my data center to somewhere else. I'm always going to have some of that, especially in manufacturing facilities or remote branches, et cetera. And I'm always trying to chip away at the complexity barrier. How can I make it simpler? We have a principle within Hewlett Packard Enterprise about building effortless IT solutions. It's become our guiding light towards the customer experience about simplifying complexity, removing stuff out of your worry bucket, getting you out of the system integration business while we do all these things at the same time, right? You can't do one without the other, so really critically important. So just a little bit of fun with it, I mentioned this already. We saw quite a lot of early adopters now refactoring where they thought they would move 100% to, say, public cloud, or now more in a hybrid mode where there may be about 50%, 40%. Use cloud to your advantage, but cloudify everything, whether it's on-prem, in a colo, in a cloud adjacent, in an edge, in an autonomous vehicle. Those are all data centers, that fungible element, and the data lives everywhere. Can I do that in an interesting way where I don't catch myself, running behind and have to retool? I think this is a core principle as well that's almost impossible for all of us to live. What Agile taught us was about minimum viable solution, yet all of us try to pursue perfection in application development, and it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. By the time you get to one end, you start over and paint back the other way. It's really tough. It's very tough for all of us in organizations to live with a good enough versus that last 15%, the last mile that takes enormous capability and then causes me to be in technical debt. So I would just encourage folks, if you can live in this agile principle, I'm not talking about, Scrum sprints and pushing out production code 17 times a day. Everyone will find their cadence of frequency. I'm talking about living with minimum viable solution within certain areas versus sort of, massaging it into oblivion. We've done that inside of Hewlett Packard Enterprise, where you take something like even Salesforce.com and customize it so much that it doesn't look anything like that SaaS app anymore, and then find out you need to reset back to zero to go, why did I customize it? And all of us have needs in our industry that deal with that. I mentioned this before about start fast, stay fast, simplify and automate, go from innovation to innovation, and pivot to the business speed. Again, so important. Technology, we've got incredible technology solutions, and Bo said it really well. I've got to have that people skill set around it. I need to get some of the subject matter experts to pivot to a full stack engineer or a deep generalist. I can't have somebody who can just lay out ones and LDAVs and someone over here can lay out east-west firewall rules and someone else who's managing the north-south flows, someone else with microsegmentation. It's why it just simply takes too long from a business request to an application deployment. We got to simplify that time. The average organization takes 90 to 120 days from request to delivery. With our new capabilities around technology, people, economics, and partnership with Evolving, we can take that down to on average about 120 seconds. So 120 days to 120 seconds. and do it in a massively secure way, and more importantly, fully remediated and fully repeatable. You know, repeatability is critical, like that I build something the same way every time and I don't drift. Once I drift, I'm in debt. And that's those day two operations that hurt everyone. So it's about run, manage, control, and secure. You know, if you look at that and put it all together around that solution domain, so this is one of the exercises we do to build the blueprint. What's your edge cloud strategy? Where are you at on your software-defined journey? What are you doing in Agile? And do you really have a tri-mode operating model? And then build concentric circles around this for the technology, processes, procedures, people skills, consultative capabilities, network designs, everything you can imagine comes into focus really quick. And then you pick the high-level vectors that you're doing really well at and the ones that you could, you know, improve on and build a journey map. And so it becomes really critical to the process. And that leads us to this new operating model, which we call tri-mode, because it's not about, you know, folks say hybrid cloud. This is a way overused term. Hybrid cloud just means you consume from multiple cloud providers. You may have vCloud Foundation on-prem, may have Nutanix, you could have Azure, AWS, GCP, but you really need a hybrid operating model, which is technical, functional, operational, compliance, security, economic, people. You know, ROI in 2020 and 21 is return on individual, not investment. It's about that culture and staff to be able to drive that model. You know, because we're finding folks have to retool and retool and respend and respend and repatriate and repatriate. So every advantage gained was lost again and then gained and lost and gained and lost. So if you can develop this operating model, you can continue forward in a very positive, momentum way. We talked about this already, building digital experiences across the enterprise, no matter where it lives, and building that continuously redefined IT supply chain. So we're talking about service brokering here, right? So this becomes a critical capability for folks. And because, you know, and we'll get to this here in a little bit, of there's just too many disparate environments, from a mission critical SAP to an Azure stack, to an Azure pack, to a Pivotal Cloud Foundry, to a Red Hat OpenShift, to a SUSE Rancher, to an Oracle environment, to a Netezza, to a Greenplum, to a Teradata, to a SaaS, and it goes on endlessly, right? And they're all managed slightly independently. And so could I pull that all together and build a digital experience capability around all of that with one unified vision to everything up and everything down? And when I say up, I'm saying in hyperscaler, and down meaning all the way to your lowest common element deployed out at your most remote edge. And the answer is yes. That is capable now today. We just find that folks haven't been able to start that journey to really unify their experience. So unification of experience around this is really important as well. And it's about driving those middle attributes, innovation optimized with delivery optimized, kind of a balancing with creative tension, really important. You know, because IT-driven projects are always going to exist, but there's business-driven ones too. And then there's customer-driven ones or industry-driven ones. And how do I find that right balance to be able to build that capability forward? And again, that's about that tri-mode operating model. And also, I think, you know, historically, we may have forgot about like encompassing all of the value chain around digital transformation. Is it the developers that, you know, they're developing the next gen apps? What about the data scientists who can find the nugget of data that gives you a competitive advantage or get you to market quicker? IT ops and AOps is just as critically important. Because I'll give you an example. We're on our 4th generation private cloud in Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And so we went all the way to the edge and gave to the developers a self-service portal where they could provision anything they wanted on their own, whether it's an Oracle instance or whatever. And the developers didn't have any idea what even to do. They didn't know about VM ratios and how much of this should be equated to this to create a package at all. So IT ops is still so critically important, but it now needs to be mixed with AI ops. So you get rid of L1, L2 tickets, you can focus on day 2, security integral, and then all the way aligned to the business leaders, right? And I think Hewlett Packard Enterprise, you know, and most players in this space have been so IT focused, we've sometimes forgot about the outcome-based initiatives or the workload optimized ones, and you'll see us in a full pivot on that. Everything we do is outcome-based, workload optimized, driven to the right constituent within an organization so we can make sure we add value at every level. Some of it's tough, right? Because there's opposing drivers. We know about cost, simplification, control, different priorities. Think you got everything under control, and then merger and activity, capabilities happen. And so everything gets reset. There's lots of complexity out there. There's no simple environment. So it's about making the complex environment simple, more simple, right? I can't erase technical debt 100%. No one is advocating you throw out anything you're already doing. We need to, add to that, be a plus model and bring capabilities that cloudify everything you're already doing. And so a lot of this is this drive towards the autonomous data center. And remember, the data center is not the data center, and the data center is this fungible element, meaning your enterprise. So how do I drive autonomous capabilities around this service delivery that's at the speed of business that's in this hybrid model? And that's really what we're talking about together here with Evolving Solutions. And part of that is, driving a software-defined journey, composing for purpose, building infrastructure as code. What I'm talking about is extraction layers, programmable capabilities. That's all API driven. That you can drive high velocity characteristics around while you're modernizing, while you're changing and reforming some of those application portfolios, because no one's going to go in and rewrite everything. And many of the off-the-shelf apps are really not cloud native and aren't going to be cloud native for a decade. So I've got to create a model around those to surround some of those older mainframe apps. Even SAP and Oracle are in a way kind of monolithic, as we all know who've used them. They may have a pretty interface up front, but behind the scenes, they're pretty monolithic. So I got to come up with a new methodology to approach all those at once. We talked to this already, right? So about driving this new API-driven world, right? This is kind of the key. Only advice I would give for folks, because I've watched these journeys a lot of times, it's very tough for an organization to set down the journey to write their own global APIs. And I've seen this from time to time across industries. The only advice I would give is very tough to keep up with the industry. I would advise folks to stay on the REST APIs that the industry consortiums have all agreed to, and the technology paths that the consortiums have all agreed to, so you don't veer left or right. There's going to be specific industries, high frequency trading, very, very latency sensitive ones where you're going to need to do your own things. But if you can adhere to an open standard that everyone's agreed to, you'll find yourself not being constricted in velocity forward. And so again, that infrastructure as code, automation, connected intelligence, so a holistic view across the whole stack with collaboration at DevOps speed, critically important. And so here's like an example of today's operational challenge. In fact, I was just working with a customer on exactly this, where they've got typical VMware. It might not even be vCloud Foundation with lifecycle management. That might just be vCenter, ESXi, trying to implement NSXT, possibly coming off of ACI. They got Microsoft, they got Red Hat, not even OpenShift, just Red Hat with some pieces and parts. They got Docker, a piece of Mesosphere actually too, starting to test other areas, ton of bare metal, lots of legacy environments, have embraced some hyperconvergent, and of course, in a cloud model using public cloud. So all those represent individual views. There's no ability in an organization to yank an app from one side to the other without a lot of complexity. So what if we could simplify that down so it's totally friction-free capabilities, it's very cost reduced, it's very fast, and be able to do it in a way with global intelligence, so it's self-managed, self-healing, and self-optimized. What I'm talking about is global learning capabilities to remediate automatically for the really common problems and some of the tougher ones. And you take that chaos and you drive it down into a composed for purpose hybrid environment that lets you have a single capability across all your apps, whether they're out at the edge or they're in the core or they're in the cloud. And that's what we've been driving towards for quite a bit of time. And we've finally been able to deliver about 90% of that capability with a little bit of journey still to complete, but lots of capabilities. And if you re-envision what Bo showed in the beginning about the modernized platforms at the bottom, and how you modernize the processes forward around automation and capabilities, but also day two life cycle, this becomes like a critical element to be able to achieve the velocity you need. And so if you look to the right here, what needs to be AI driven? It has to be autonomous, self-healing, predictive, self-optimizing, can detect intrusions, zero trust automation, and be able to take actions on it. So quite a lot beyond just software defined. Software defined is a separation of control and data planes. So that gets you part of the way there. But all of us have been focusing too long on automating provisioning. Automated provisioning is day one. Day two is that life cycle management. I've got to do upgrades because I'm out of compliance. I've got PCI or HIPAA, or I've got all the way to NIST compliance that's going on, or lots of capabilities we all have in our industry. How do I deal with that in a holistic way across my enterprise? That's what we're talking about. And so, just an example of this is just spending time. So we need dramatic improvements. If I put something in front of you that improves by 5 to 20%, it's probably a yawn for you. You need 10x, 20x, 50x, 100x improvements in automation and capabilities, and it has to be supported across a really broad ecosystem that's open and what everyone uses, to be honest. And so, it's about being a time warrior. And so back to my example of a 90 to 120 day down to 120 seconds, taking thousands of manual processes down to a single remediated, repeatable capability that's fully programmable, and using automation to deal with the heavy lift, right? So that's what we're talking about as part of this, and doing it all the way from core to cloud. This is an example of one of the platforms we drove to do this, right? Our Synergy platform. I'm not here to give you an advertisement about our hardware today, but it was about delivering infrastructure as code and then building on top of that with things like Terraform. So you could build an application that can live anywhere, and you can drive it from tier 0, 1, 2, and 3 all the way through your ecosystem in a DevOps velocity way, right? And run every workload you want without trade-off. And that was the goal of the platform, and a lot of that's been delivered across every ecosystem. Deliver every kind of app you have, whether it's dev, QA, production, tier 0, tier 1, production databases to everything in between, and do that on an extensible platform that's very fungible in nature. That brings me to another area here I mentioned twice already of there's definitely a move in organizations, just as we as humans, from owning things to using things. So folks want a cloud operating model, and they want as a service consumption. So our GreenLake brand, which we re-announced some new things at our virtual Discover, is about the cloud that comes to you, whether it's in your data center or in your edge or in a colo. It's about driving cloud capabilities all the way through the ecosystem that are aligned to pay per use, that are aligned to managed service offerings, that are full self-service, that scale up and down, managed by you in a way that's very different than the traditional capital acquisition, sweat that asset for a long period of time, deal with all of those things. So you can really focus head on at that and do it in a way where we have a whole project around what's called centrals, where you got a unified view to your world up and down again. You can see the applications are running in public. You can see the ones you're running in cloud adjacent colos like Equinix, Xterra, Edge Connect, Switch, etc., CenturyLink. But also see the ones you've got to run in your manufacturing facilities, for example, and be able to see across not just VMs, but also containers, bare metal, AI environments, mission critical environments, HPC environments, etc., across all the different places where you're running data and have throughput. And so it's about accelerating cloud services, optimizing standardized configurations, and building that self-service experience. So we've moved a long way in this journey. So I encourage folks to look at that in partnership with Evolving. For folks that want to move to the new, I'm tired of choosing model, I want it just managed model, I want it just aligned to my usage model. If you're a retailer, right, where you've got your blackout season, you want to be able to burst up and down. And after that point, you don't want to be stuck with the peak moment. This is what we're talking about here, and that aligns to every industry. And so kind of coming to a bit of a close here on this, if you think about where we're headed in this data-driven world around a hybrid operating model, around everyone's intelligent edge initiatives, how we do security and zero trust around secure root of trust capabilities, zero trust, what we're doing from platforms all the way to the edge, what's going on in memory-driven computing, HPC, and AI and ML have become much more mainstream for organizations as becoming the heart of IT, to be able to not just do AI ops, but also business-driven AI and memory-driven capabilities, all the way edge to core, as I described. Full software-defined and multi-cloud, as Bo opened it up with. I think everyone's in a multi-cloud hybrid reality, and it needs to and has to be software-defined. It can no longer be hardware-defined. Hardware-defined is simply too limiting, requires too many resources to be able to keep live and healthy, and build a broad technology ecosystem that's open. And you'll see all the consortiums we belong to are about openness. If you look at where things like CXL and Gen Z are, with 58 partners in the mix. So we're all in this co-opetition mode. Our job is to deliver exceptional experiences to you in your heterogeneous environment. No one's going to be homogenous. We're not in an illusion that that's true. And I think that's really important in hybrid thinking. And it's about flexible consumption. And also, as I said before, with evolving solutions in HPE, advice and expertise in areas you don't have. Maybe it's a new container adoption model that you maybe are looking for advice on. Maybe it's setting up the digital renovation blueprint. Maybe it's an edge implementation at smart manufacturing or smart campus or smart hospitality. We've got all of those covered, and lots of use cases and references around them. And it's about driving to outcomes. And so because of that push, that allowed us to introduce a new set of technologies within the software-defined portfolio at our Discover, what we call Esmeralda. And so this encompasses a lot of this areas that on the next journey of application development that organizations are on around containers, AI ops and automation, zero trust security. All these capabilities are now within our Esmeralda portfolio, all delivered in either a GREENLAKE capability or in a traditional way. And so you're going to see a lot of outcome-based solutions where we take this embedded technology and drive an outcome. For example, with Splunk compliance analytics, completely driven around this outcome, and there's a couple dozen more, where you can leap forward in capability without you having to be the system integrator to drive to the business outcome and functionality you need. At the end of the day, though, it's all about delivering exceptional experiences everywhere across everyone within the organization that you're supporting. And at the same time, the North Star is always the customer. So it's about customer experience, customer experience, customer experience, customer everywhere. And so that's what I have for now. And then I'm going to turn it back to Bo for a little bit of Q&A. So hopefully that was helpful. I know it's a bit of a high level. It's tough with a mixed audience to dive in any one singular area.
That was awesome. Thank you very much, Scott. Appreciate it. And now we have a few questions. Apologize, I'm getting feedback. Scott, I might be getting feedback.
Yeah, no worries, Bo.
All right. So, a couple of questions. We'll start first one here. With all these things like security, data, network, edge, that are important to interconnect, where do you start? And then more importantly, how do you decide where to start?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And you can see, and I didn't go over today, a part of our acquisition strategy is try to address exactly that. If folks haven't followed, we have an intent to acquire Silver Peak right now, which is the #1 SD-WAN leader, to be able to, we already have very robust edge level security intelligent capabilities at the edge. Down at the platform level, we had secure root of trust. We acquired Cytail, which is the user identity security capabilities. We're a 20% owner of Pensando, which is a smart NIC distributed mesh capability that can drastically, I mean, dramatically simplify your world, eliminating east-west firewalls, eliminating microsegmentation, eliminating overlays. So it's about consolidating functions. So rather than start with 20 technologies, start with the fundamental business capability you're trying to achieve and then work back. And I think, again, I know I'm not trying to be vague here because there's no one singular solution for each organization, but there's some pretty advanced thinking on how you implement zero trust versus the traditional method of it. So it's a great question. Love to, whoever asked it, love to have a a partnership conversation with you on it, and we can dive deep. I can go into any area you want on that and tell you some lessons learned for sure.
Awesome. And so that you just also mentioned Silver Peak, and so a question came in around that. So HPE just announced an acquisition of Silver Peak. Can you share where you think that fits into Aruba's product strategy?
Yeah, it sits under Aruba Central as being like a premier wireless campus edge security policy, cloud managed offering. Silver Peak had a leadership SD-WAN capability. And so those together come together with the leadership of Aruba plus the leadership of Silver Peak in a way to drive all the way to think about branch in a box. So what if you take, for example, a retailer in 300 locations, you want all of the SD-WAN, 5G technology, all the capabilities that support that store, all driven in a managed way. So Silver Peak gives us the ability to head that extra mile. We already had some SD-WAN capabilities within the Aruba portfolio, but folks that have looked at Silver Peak knows they're number one in their space. And it's really between them and VMware up in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, where he now puts us up at the very, very top. And again, that's an intent to acquire. I just kind of have to say that to protect the innocent. So I'd love to talk to whoever asked that too. I just had a very deep discussion with another client on that of where it'll fit in the portfolio, and I can share with you those details for sure.
Awesome, perfect. Another question that came in, as you talk about, in quotes, cloud first, right? Some people only think public cloud or hyperscalers. How do you help companies understand cloud is really just that cloud-like experience that you mentioned, and it's not just talking about putting workloads in a hyperscaler?
Yeah, I think it is the biggest problem because, C-level execs, when they hear cloud first, they think public cloud. They think Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform in the third place, and even Cloud 28 Plus across other regions of the world. But none of them can solve all the problems, right? You can't solve walls of latency. You can't solve, secure data. You can't, right? And so I think it's about using all those locations because, 85% of the organizations still use VMware and are moving to vCloud Foundation or Nutanix. Those are all cloud environments. The key is creating a cloud operating model that encompasses all those and not stranding yourself in one area. Because just hosting a VM in a public cloud provider might get you the ability to modernize your data center, which is a critical component. But that's lift and shift still, right? And, the catch is usually folks don't realize till about 20 months in the cost model to that. And so it has to be cost optimized, security optimized, agility optimized. Don't get me wrong, public cloud providers can give some organization extra agility that they haven't been able to stand up themselves. But that cloud operating model is critical. And what we found is now folks are refactoring the ratio of what we call the right mix. What will be where? And it's still not even a problem with starting in a hyperscaler, but you might not run it there. You might develop it there. And I think that's a very different construct than it's existed for the last 4 years.
I think that's what we hear a lot from clients too. You mentioned this earlier, not being locked in. People want portability, and they don't want it to be a science project. So I think what you just said, that's what we hear a lot from clients is just don't lock me in. Let me be able to put it. So I might build my workload here in the public cloud, but I want to run it here or vice versa. We hear that quite frequently.
Well, and I think everybody's real about this. This is what I call a over beers conversation. There's 5 reasons customers change environments, just 5. I've been doing this 30 years, almost 7,000 clients. I'll give you a simple example. I'm not trying to be funny, but if Mr. Satya and Nadella, Microsoft audit you, and you find out you're not software compliant on Microsoft, you are finding a way out of Azure. And guess what? You didn't write your way out of Azure, and to be able to rewrite that to AWS is a full rewrite. Unless you're just hosted VMs, but you can host your own VMs for about 50% less. This is the catch. The farther you go in to get business value, the more you're locked. So where do you find that balance point where you're portable enough, you're agile enough, but you're extracting or harvesting business value? You're not just doing it for technology's sake. Now, some folks have to get out of the data center. Folks have aged data centers. All those catalysts are all real and material. And I think that digital renovation blueprint tugs at all those threads and say, what's the real part of it? What are you trying to accomplish at the end? Not just year one. And quite honestly, there's technology barriers still that folks haven't solved. Containers aren't really portable. Containers are like, people used to say Java was portable, right? And then you'd write in WebSphere and it couldn't move to Bluestone and it couldn't move to Oracle Fusion middleware, which is called BEA. They were all rewrites. And you went, I thought Java was portable. It's the same thing kind of going on a bit. And I think folks just are trying to be careful there, but they can't wait either, right? They need more speed, right? So love to have that conversation with whoever asked that as well. I've got deep details on that, could show you a lot of insight.
Perfect. This might be the most controversial question of the day. Is a digital experience really just a piece of software or middleware, or are you suggesting something much more elegant?
I'm saying the digital experience can be within an organization or what you're driving for, like smart manufacturing, that's the experience, or the customer experience itself. So it's not just about, unfortunately, customer experience like was harvested out of mobile first, I'm doing air quotes. A beautiful UI, that's not customer experience. Customer experience is about simple, easy to deal with, almost no learning curve, self-remediated, all those things are about the digital experience. Yes, it does take some pieces of software glued together to complete that, but it is not about we have some magic piece of software to accomplish what we call the digital experience. And I think it'll vary by organization or, quite honestly, vertical industry. If you're doing compound research now looking for, a leading vaccine to get us out of this COVID-19, it's a very different challenge than doing shrinkage around video analytics for a retailer or fraud. So there's a different experience there that you're looking for internally or externally. And so we got a lot of attributes around that and what we call our, I'm doing air quotes, apologize, what we call our smart initiatives or intelligent initiatives that take the digital experience at the high level and then work all the way backwards. We're not starting at the hardware platform first and moving up anymore. We're starting at the outcome back. And I think that's the critical moment that I know it sounds really, vague and kind of soft and squishy, but it is absolutely true what we're talking about.
I think that, Scott, what you just said there, I think is a perfect segue to our last question here, because I know we're running out short on time. Who do you see driving the innovation agenda in most companies? Is it CIO down? Is it the ground up? Or is it someone in the line of business forcing IT to change?
I think the line of business is forced folks faster to public cloud because of shadow IT, and they just wanted to go faster. They couldn't deal with 120 days from, I've just seen this, like you request something in ServiceNow, it's got to go through all the approval flow. There's never any extra ports on the network switches. There's never any LUNs and LDEVs laid out, right? They're never. The east-west flows aren't set up because you have to do those for compliance. In public cloud, some of that's happened. So line of business has driven some of that velocity, but I haven't seen them been driving disruptive innovation, more evolutionary innovation. Disruptive innovation is going in and improving something by 100x, 1,000x. Moore's law, evolutionary innovation at 10 to 12% is all what we're still living. And so it just depends a lot, because sometimes CIOs are acting as CDOs and CISOs and CTOs. Sometimes CTOs are acting as CIOs. And I find that different and variable in a lot of accounts, just based on maybe the passion area that individual has, the team that's surrounding them, quite honestly, the disruption the company's under on how fast they're going to go, how they've embraced open source versus commercial off the shelf. And we're a product of this, the age of your company. Born in the cloud versus sort of like pre-cloud and after cloud, right? It plays a huge role because, and those are all good and bad, right? It goes back to those culture and staff kind of things too, around how do you think like a startup but act like an enterprise? That, I think that says it all.
Yep. I think that's perfect. That's a great way to end it. So, Scott, I just want to say thank you for joining us again here today. We really appreciate it. For those of you that joined, if you would like to have any follow-up conversations with Scott or virtual briefings, Scott has offered to do that since obviously we're not traveling right now. So happy to set that up, reach out to us. And then this wraps up our 4-part series for our technology update over the summer here. So if you missed one of the sessions, feel free to go to the Evolving Solutions YouTube page, and all the replays are out there, and Scott's will be in a couple of days as well. And then we'll launch a new series this fall here after Labor Day. So be on the lookout for that as well. So Scott, thanks for joining us, and everybody that joined on the call today, have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.